Yes, so I've done Python for a while, but I do love doing these PBJ talks. So our Python beginner jams are basically an opportunity for us to give newer folks to Python some content here in the room. But as an experienced Pythonista, I always learn something when I give these talks. Because usually I'm going over a subject or something I don't use every day, or I've gone deeper into it than I normally would have, and I found little nice nuggets, so I hope you guys do too. Speaking of that, one of the nice things about Python, you guys have probably all heard this, is that it is batteries included. I think that it's one of Python's true strengths that if you need to do RFC message, email message processing, there's a library to do that. If you want to start up a socket and a web server, you don't have to download anything or any extra bits. Python can do that. Well, luckily enough for us, if you wanted to do some manipulation or some parsing of CSV files, look no further. You do not have to install anything. You just have to import the CSV module into your program, and you're ready to actually parse and use CSV files. This was one of the things that really attracted me to Python was the fact I didn't have to install half the world to be able to do simple string manipulation or to do something as standard as doing CSV import and export and writing. Unlike other, I won't name some of the other languages, but there are some other languages maybe represented in the room where you may have a dependency tree in your project of a couple hundred dependencies and all you're doing is writing a simple website. We won't name them. But Python doesn't make you do that. So let's get kicked off real quick here. The first thing we're going to talk about is how to read in a CSV file. Now, I have put all this, I haven't pushed it yet. I've committed to my local Git. All this info, the slides, the sample code, the demo files, everything is actually up in the IndyPy GitHub repository. As soon as I am finished, I'll actually let you guys watch me get pushed so you can verify that I did do it. I will push all this up into the GitHub so you guys can try it out on your own. So I went out and found some sample CSV files to play with, and luckily data.gov still has some data in it. I was surprised. But it's all fake. Well, this may be fake news then. But I picked up just some random CSV file, like the top one off the top of the list, actually happened to be demographics for statistics by zip code for New York. That's New York City. And I wanted to be able to read it in and maybe start to do something with that data. So if you take a look, the very first thing we need to do is import CSV. So as I said before, Python has batteries included, so all the things you need to do to manipulate CSV files are all included and already ready for you to go inside of the Python interpreter. So this is 6 lines of code. I have imported CSV. I have opened the file. So we're actually using what's called a context manager right here. This handles opening the file, and when I leave this indented section of code, it actually handles closing the file safely for me as well, which is nice. There are lots of things like this that operate under context managers inside of Python. This is new as of Python 2.6, I think. So it's been around a while. But it was new to me back in the day. So I always make sure you use context managers. It's kind of the right thing to do when opening files. So here, we're just opening a file with the open built-in. So with then the open keyword, which is a built-in in Python, I pass it the name of the file. That file just happens to be living in the same directory as this Python script. And then I say as f. So now f is a name, actually a label. And Python doesn't have variables. That's a whole other talk. But f is a label that refers to this open file handle to my file. I've not read any of my file yet. I'm just sitting there holding on to a reference to it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to read my file. So I'm taking f. I'm going to pass it into csv.reader. Now, another thing you may have heard about Python is that everything in Python are objects. If you get a function as an object, anything you give as a return from typical calls like this are going to be objects, and this is no different. You're actually getting back a CSV reader object when that call happens. So reader isn't just a data structure that contains the contents of that CSV file. Reader is actually a special object inside of Python that allows you to iterate over each row inside the CSV file, and then it knows how to interpret CSV files based on various dialects, which we'll talk about in a bit. So in its most simple case, we use it as an iterator, so we can iterate over reader right here, so for row in reader, and then we'll just print out the row. One nice thing about this is that since reader, and this is Python 3, and it is an iterator, it is going to be pretty memory intensive. So it's going to basically pull up each line as it goes through the file. So I actually don't, if you could have a 10 gigabyte file here, you could still do this on a machine with half a gigabyte of RAM, because you're only going to typically be reading one row at a time into memory. Once you've gone through and used that row, you've kind of moved the cursor in that file down to the next line, and you're operating on that line. So actually, if we'll take a look, we can see how that works. Where am I at? Here we go. Show you guys that real quick. So I already have CSV imported, and then we will do with open, oops, not used to my keyboard now. Grab the name of that file. Now you'll notice I'm not using any special operators like to write back to the file. We'll use that later. There's special flags you can actually pass there to be able to write back to that file. So now we'll do a reader. Oops, CSV. And there we go. What we got back where it was basically a set of lists. For every iteration we went through the line, it passed me back a row in the form of a Python list. So it knew how to split up the rows inside the comma-separated file. If there were new lines in there, it knows how to handle that too, which we'll talk about next. But if we look at the reader, you'll see that it is a CSV reader object. It is not any other kind of special thing, and nothing magical about it. It is just an object that's been returned to you from Python. So what about line breaks? So say you've got some paragraphs of text maybe in one of your columns. What's nice is that Python can do that too. Oops, I was supposed to show you that as the example. Okay. So if we run, in this case, I've read in a file that has, let me show you, actually it might be helpful if I showed you the example. This is a list of banks, all the list of banks, like truncated, all the list of banks that have failed in the United States. The first one you can see there, line 2, Washington Federal Bank, has a new line for savings. And so inside of the output, you'll see that it actually included the \n for an escaped carriage return right there in the output of the reader. So when it read it in, it understood that that was a multi-lined piece of text or string and brought it right in for us like nothing happened. It's like magic. Actually, it's not magic. It's Python. It's awesome. So now, you've read in your CSV. You can iterate over those rows, do whatever you want to do to those rows. You can immediately write them back out to another CSV file if you want it. This is just a few more lines of code. In this case, we're going to open the demo CSV file, and you'll see we're passing an additional flag there, the W. That just means to write. I've opened a file handle. The previous one was to read only. If I tried to write to it, I'd get an error. In this case, I can now write back to that file while it's open. So I get the file handle F. Just the same way as the previous example, writer that's being returned to us is an object. So it's a Python object that has attributes and is an iterator, and we can do things to it and actually feed data into it. In our case, we're going to write a header row. So if we have a CSV file and we want to have a special header row across the top, we can just pass in a tuple of strings. Those will become the header row. And then I just did a kind of contrived example here, but I made a row with an increasing number in the first column, a hello world, same number in the second column, and then IndyPy rocks in the last column. The writer object itself has a method called writer row, and you just pass it that sequence type, and you'll be able to write it out to a file. So if we do look at that example, here we go. So not very exciting because there was no output to the screen. Nothing came to standard output, but if we look at demo.csv, You'll see in the output, this is my fancy Vim plugin, but it's a CSV of column 1, 2, 3, and then you can see the data got written out into the CSV file itself. Make that easier to read for you guys. There you go. Actually, just to show it wasn't fancy smoke and mirrors, you can see there's actual commas, not pipes. That's just my fancy Vim. If you guys want to see my fancy Vim.files, they're on my GitHub as well. That's totally another meetup, I agree. Okay, so that is the writing of CSV files. Again, what's nice, it's very easy, very straightforward, and very consistent API. You can almost guess what those method calls are going to be. Read row, writer row, from case to case. Now, sometimes you need to quote fields in special cases. So, for example, you've got Unicode characters or ASCII or non-ASCII characters in there, and some of your applications that may be consuming your written CSV files may not handle that very well. So Python gives you the ability to choose how you want to deal with it. The default case is quote minimal, which means it will only put quotes around the fields that have any special characters in them. And you can define what those special characters are if you really wanted to kind of extend that further. Or you can say quote all. Like, I don't care what it is, quote everything under the sun. You know, if it's a number, put quotes around it. That my application that's going to be consuming the CSV expects that, go ahead and do it. Now, you can also say non-numeric or don't quote anything. Even if there are special characters in there, I don't want quotes around anything because maybe my receiving application doesn't know how to handle quotes. So if anyone's been in computer science or programming and implementing data transfer mechanisms for any extended period of time, you will run into crazy systems that don't handle things like you think were standard, like CSVs, very well. But this is what you can do. Now, the CSV module can also speak different dialects, because you may be asking yourself, what about tab-separated values? Well, we can handle that, which is nice. Out of the box, the CSV module itself can tell you what dialects are registered from the Python distribution, which are these three right here, Excel, Excel Tab, and Unix. But you can register your own. You can actually set your own dialects, and when you do that, what you do is basically set up a set of parameters for that dialect. Think of it as the advanced save box from your Excel file when you're choosing how you want it to like save out. Do I want tabs? Do I want commas? Or do I want some other random delimiter? You can specify by specifying the delimiter on your dialect. Same thing for whether you want double quotes or single quotes. Whether you want if you want to have a special escape character, special line terminators. All these things allow you to customize basically to whatever application is going to be sending or receiving. This isn't just for writing. This is also for if you're intaking CSV files and it's got some special formatting that Python just can't seem to suss out what it is, because it will try. It will actually, I'll show you in a minute here, but it has a sniffer built into it to try and detect what kind of dialect it actually is. So you can actually ask from a specific dialect. So I want to know what the settings are for Excel tab dialect. The return, again, everything's an object. The return will be a dialect object, and on that dialect object, it has all those same parameters I just showed you from the previous screen, and you can actually just interrogate them. Dialect.delimiter, and it'll show you that this case, the tab version is going to give you tabs as the delimiters on reading and writing. Now, Python is somewhat smart about this. You don't have to specify specific dialects if it already understands them. What it'll do is actually use the sniffer. So if you instantiate a new sniffer object by calling csv.sniffer, you can open up your file and just pass it one line. So in this case, I'm not giving it f like the whole file. I'm giving it just one of the lines of text. That's what this read line function does right here. And from that, it can tell me what the dialect delimiter is. In this case, it knows that the delimiter for that file, or that line anyway, is going to be commas. It'll also tell you whether there's double quotes or non-double quotes used in that snippet or section of CSV that you hand to it. You can also have it sniff out if there's a header. So if you've exported a CSV file and you've got the header row in there, Python actually can be smart enough to know whether there's a header row present or not. Now, there are special readers which are really powerful, and these can go even deeper. But we can have a dictionary reader. So it's basically a subclass of the existing Python reader, but instead of giving you back rows of sequences or lists, you actually get back a dictionary for every row inside of your CSV file, which can be pretty powerful. because you want to cut out, you want to be able to call your rows by name. You know what the column names are supposed to be, and it would be nice if you could just address them that way when you're printing it out. So you can see right here, for row and reader, I'm addressing it like a dictionary. So in this case, these are not going to be sequences, those are going to be dictionaries. For every dictionary and reader, I can now call the key bank name, which was the header of that column, and get back the bank name. You can see it included my return right here. And then if you are using a dict reader like that, you can actually ask it. It has special attributes, for example, that the other normal reader does not have, which is for field names. So if you actually wanted to see what the header row field names were, so if you were dynamically bringing in CSV files, wanting to then call specific rows, but you didn't know what they were called, you could actually interrogate the CSV file and get the field names back from that. That's kind of the basics of using CSVs with Python. It's super easy to get started with. There are a couple links I've included here. There is a third one that I will include, which is we have a blog post on the 6 Feet Up site, which actually talks about building, if you're stuck in Python 2.7 or before land, dealing with Unicode and encoding with this stuff can be really tricky. I don't recommend it. I'd recommend sticking on Python 3 if you can, but if you are on Python 2.7, I have a blog post up there that shows you how to make a Unicode reader and a Unicode writer so they can correctly handle characters that aren't ASCII. Cool. That's the PBJ. If anybody got any questions? Awesome. Go forth and read and write CSV files.